Good evening again. I'd like to call the committee of the whole for the Village of Cary for November 1st, 2022 to order with roll call, please.
Cavelli?
Here.
Dudek?
Here.
Weinhammer?
Here.
McAlpine?
Here.
Collier?
Here.
Walrath?
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Moving to the public comment. So the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda. I'm not aware of anything. Is anybody here that'd like to address the committee of the whole? We'll go ahead and close open forum at 6:44. First item of business, a discussion regarding the outdoor water restriction ordinance amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. So this evening, I'd like to discuss the concept of possibly amending our outdoor water restriction ordinance. As the committee may recall, back in 2018, the village did take some steps to update its outdoor water conservation ordinance for the first time in many, many years. That original ordinance, prior to the current version, did allow the village to prohibit lawn sprinkling and irrigation in the event of a water supply emergency, but it unfortunately lacked a tiered structure that is used by many other neighboring communities to help us conserve water in advance of the crisis. So the update at that point did allow us to put in some intermediate steps, what we call our red, yellow, green. Our yellow tier is that intermediate step to help start throttling back and encouraging more water conservation ahead of a extreme emergency in the water system. However, with our current ordinance, the tiered structure does not include measures to promote conservation during our normal conditions. So our current green status is unregulated, unlimited use of outdoor water for irrigation and sprinkling. So why conserve water? This slide here highlights some of the issues that were presented and discussed in our previous discussion back in 2018 with a few updates. Without going into each of the bullet points there is a common theme. There's certain elements and benefits that are financial, and that goes to both the customer or the residents in terms of reducing waste, just given the fact that studies have shown that of all the water utilized on a residential property, typically about half of that water is actually wasted due to inefficient use in terms of timing, weather, if you're fighting evaporation in terms of heat and sun, to overwatering, where the benefits to the lawn actually aren't realized by the excess water. Environmental benefits also resulting from the reduction in waste, I think are self-explanatory. We have a limited amount of water in the earth, and like every community in the McHenry County area, we all rely on groundwater for our only source of drinking water. The amount of water is limited, and there are limited options for that precious resource. So our current ordinance provisions do mirror the industry best practices for the most part. The main facets are educating customers and getting an easy to understand way to educate them on what status is in effect, and that color coding status that we now have does meet that goal. I also want to make sure that our ordinances provide practical options for promoting and implementing that restriction, and to actually have the benefit to reduce the water use and the stress on the water system. And that's typically done with either a limit on the days you can water outside or the times of the day you can water outside. And then finally, we also need to make sure that our ordinance has appropriate provisions for making it easy to implement and also easy to enforce in the case that we do have a water system emergency. So speaking of best practices, there are 3 main model ordinances that are out there in our region and that staff has looked at. The first is regulations that are in place by the state of Illinois, and these apply to all the communities in the Chicago region that are serviced by Lake Michigan water. And those provisions generally, like the other models I've shown here, have an allowable time restriction and allowable day restriction. The other 2, the Northwest Water Planning Alliance, covers the Northeast Illinois Chicagoland region, and they have some very in-depth and detailed language for proposed ordinances and again, also follow the industry standard best practices for limiting times to water, which is really in the morning hours and the evening hours. So in this case, for that model, it's 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then they have a standard approach, which is considered an even-odd approach, where if your address of your property has an even number, you would be allowed to do your outdoor watering on those morning and evening hours on calendar days that are even numbers, and then so forth for the odd. And then finally, CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, they also have a model ordinance for water conservation as a whole, which also includes similar parameters, but even a more restrictive, more conservation-oriented approach, where they do limit to, they structure it differently, but it is still a evening and morning hour limit. They encourage that you also restrict the number of hours per day that properties would be allowed to apply water to their landscaping. And then they encourage a maximum of 2 days per week for each property to water, whereas the even-odd approach would be 3 to 4 days per week. So slightly different approaches with the same goals and the same parameters to kind of meet that end game and that goal of reducing water usage for the environment and for the utility. In terms of a comparison, this is a big table, so I will kind of describe what's going on here. Each column is a different municipality in our McHenry County area. The first column being the Village of Cary's current ordinance, and as you go right alphabetically to some of our neighboring communities. And then each row is a different tier for the structured restrictions that are in place for each community. So our current ordinance in Cary, you'll notice that red status, which is consistent across the board for all communities, that's an all-out ban on any outdoor water use. So that would be reserved for the most extreme or severe drought conditions or a water system emergency if you had a production issue from multiple well facilities or a significant main break or storage capacity issue. Some communities, not all, do have an orange status, kind of an additional fourth tier that they've added to help bridge the gap between the all-out ban in an emergency and their normal green condition, which would be their standard approach when there's not a condition that would warrant a restriction. And yellow, which is the standard that most communities have, is their intermediate approach. For every community, but Cary typically is using the even-odd structure that I mentioned. That's common in the the state of Illinois approach to Lake Michigan water use and the Northwest Water Planning Alliance. The times of day that each community has does vary community to community, but most of them are generally consistent with the industry standard of that 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. approach. You'll notice that Cary's does differ from the other communities. Our current yellow status allows water use outside any day of the week, but only from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then the green condition, which is the standard approach, like I mentioned, when there's not an issue or an emergency. Cary's current code is unrestricted, unlimited use any day, any time, any amount. Most other communities do vary, but many of them do have some form of a restriction, whether it's just a time restriction or a day restriction. So with that, staff has taken the best facets of our neighboring communities, the model ordinances, and industry standards, and then taken also a good hard look at what works best for Cary itself. So what I've shown here are 3 options that I would love to have some feedback from the committee on. Option 1 is actually maintaining the status quo. That is our current code with no changes. And then going left to right, you'll see as you go further right in the options here by column, the furthest to the right will be the option that gives us the most focus and the most benefit from a water conservation standpoint. And then the farthest to the left is the least benefit to water conservation, but the most flexibility and freedom of use for the property owners. Option 2 in the second column is very similar to the NWPA, the Northwest Water Planning Alliance model ordinance, with some slight tweaks. So in the green condition, so the everyday condition, this would propose to have the standard restriction encourage and require that outdoor sprinkling and irrigation only be done in the recommended morning and evening hours, but any day, so no day restrictions at all. That time facet to the proposals kind of aims at the technique to try and reduce waste, because you're eliminating the amount of watering that goes on to when it's applied onto the grass at the warmest, driest parts of the day, and you lose all the benefits, or most of the benefit, to evaporation. And then obviously the late night hours are also discouraged, just given the fact from a healthy lawn, not having that water sit there and combine with the dew that sometimes forms overnight, the best health and the optimal health for the lawn will be reduced with less disease if there's less moisture overnight. And then option 2 in the yellow condition, it's the same time parameters, but then it would shift to an even odd day restriction. So essentially, instead of 7 days a week, again, 3 to 4 days per week per household, just to help, if the condition is warranted, to help reduce that overall use of water. And then the third tier would be a proposed orange tier, which would prohibit the use of the automatic sprinkler and irrigation systems, but still allow outdoor water use with handheld devices. And that would be with whether it's a hose, manually applying it yourself, or with the old-fashioned buckets and sprinkle over the flower beds and so forth. So still allowing some outdoor water use, but we're in that, again, major tier, probably reserved for the severe or significant drought conditions that might be out there, or a major water system issue if we had multiple wells down or another emergency, but still had the ability to allow water use to occur. And then red would remain the same, a full outdoor water use ban for that emergency. And the third option is very similar again, but the base tier in that option would be the even odd, morning and evening hour only approach. So that green status in the third option is what the yellow status was in the previous. And then you're seeing this kind of shift diagonally down into the right. Then the yellow tier in the third option would be what was in the orange tier for the second option, allowing outdoor water use, but only by hand, no automated pre-programmed systems for that condition. And then no orange in that third option, and red stays the same. So with that, I'd love to hear any feedback you might have if there's a desire to consider a different amendment to our water conservation ordinance. Staff does recommend an option that does encourage more conservation, just for the benefit of our water system, less stress on the water system, less cost for the water system, and the environmental benefits. But if the desire of the committee is to remain the status quo, we are perfectly fine with maintaining that and continuing that process.
Okay. Trustee Weinhammer?
Right, so I totally agree with you with the whole water conservation and that it's definitely needed. And I'm open to any of the options. I guess my question is, and we don't have a sprinkler system and we don't really water our grass, but for people who do, this is a lot to keep track of. It seems like with everybody going to everything that they're doing during the day and then trying to keep track of, can I water on this day, can I water on that day? And then, I don't know, people who have a watering system, maybe it's not hard to keep track of. And I'm also thinking, you know, I had a resident recently say that one of the neighbors called on them about that they called the police on them saying that they were watering on a day that they weren't allowed to water on. And I guess I have a lot going through my head right now. It's a lot to take in. So I'm going to listen to everybody else's comments. Those are like what I'm thinking kind of right now, and then I'll go ahead and add to it. But I agree about the water conservation, but I'm just thinking there's a lot here.
There's a lot.
And
That's
to
what I was
that,
talking to Jake. There's a lot here. Trustee
You put it on
Walworth?
the
yeah.
committee, so you don't have to prove
We could,
anything tonight.
and I don't think we have anything to worry about for the next couple of months, so we can continue the conversation. Am I right?
Yep, there is a method to my madness of the timing of this discussion.
I was just going to say, if this was the spring, it would be a little bit different.
Who's next?
But that's
Trustee Walworth had indicated.
A couple of questions for Eric. How would you envision our friends at the school districts, the park districts who have, you know, sports turf and turf that is revenue producing for them? How would you envision them in the yellow, orange, red scenarios, having either restrictions in place or coming from my background, God forbid, an outright ban on watering?
No, certainly. And actually, the acronym, we love our acronyms in engineering and public works, the Northwest Water Planning Alliance, NWPA, their model ordinance actually does a very good job of accounting for those outlying circumstances, which in the case you're referencing is not so much an outlier, but just a different category, not your residential type use. So their base ordinance would help account for those situations by including provisions for whether it be a permit or a variance. So that would include for commercial uses that are maybe typical to the landscaping, like your typical, say, landscaping and lawns around commercial uses. This would still apply to those uses because obviously the water use would still be appropriate to maintaining those. But those other uses that are more specific to the operation, similarly to like if a manufacturing company uses water for the production of a certain chemical or paint or something like that, obviously a water restriction would not be put in place that adversely affected a business like that. So the same would go for a golf course or a commercial entity like a park district with a pool and so forth. So there would be a permit and a variance process in place to be practical with that.
Okay,
The other
and I
side
would
of it-
also agree that I believe option 2 and 3 are something we most certainly consider. We've only seen the tip of what's going to come with water conservation in the future. And the last few years, we've had a few. But I would echo Trustee Weinhammer's comments of we really make sure that we understand how the communication piece goes out and then how the enforcement piece is going to happen as well. Because it is twofold. Number one, having somebody, this is a very direct line telling somebody what they can and cannot do on their property. That really gets to the heart of what we're trying to avoid, which is I can do what I want at my own house. But understanding the education piece of why we're doing this. And then number two, to be quite honest, I know a lot of people have sprinkler systems, have absolutely no idea how they work whatsoever. And when we did have restrictions here recently, and you walk around and you see people's irrigations, I would almost guarantee the people at the home have no idea how to alter those. So communicating that piece not only to the owners of how that would happen and maybe to the lawn services that are engaged in the neighborhood. So that communication piece well in advance of whatever summer we're looking to engage this. And then what the enforcement piece would look at, I'd be interested to see how we're planning on attacking that as well.
I think we need to look for making it simple and easy to understand.
I agree.
It's got to be clear cut. There's way too many options here.
I think it's very overwhelming. I mean, my
I
initial,
get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it. But
I do
we
too,
need
but
to.
Where do we stand now? What's the enforcement now, and what's the fines right now?
Our current code does have provisions for enforcement and fines. It is up to $75 per day per violation.
And who goes out and issues those fines?
So that would be a combination of various departments of staff. Actually, any department of staff is kind of authorized to initiate those conversations and that process. But currently, we obviously, I think like all of our peers, other communities, we take approach where we engage the property owner and we verbally ask them for compliance. So there's not an immediate, you see it happening, there's not a ticket issued and a fine issued. You work towards compliance. But if there's repeated disregard for that following that initial contact, written notice is provided per our standard approach to any violation, and then the tickets and the fine process is going through our normal adjudication process.
I'd imagine it'd be property maintenance.
Just wondering, and just an odd question maybe, but where does our water stand now as in the amount we have in the ground that's pumpable?
Sure. Currently, and I'll speak first regionally and then specifically to Cary. So regionally, McHenry County, based on information and data compiled by the Illinois State Water Survey, has shown that our current pumping levels, so the demand that is drawn from the ground by all the communities out here, is right about or slightly above the calculated sustainable yield for our aquifer. So what that means is that right now we're just slightly above where we want to be able to keep our water system at the optimal level. Obviously long term, so next 20, 30 years, if growth occurs in the region, either at a rapid pace or even at the current pace, that delta between the difference between the sustainable safe point that we want to be at with the aquifer and what we're pulling out of the ground as a region is going to continue to grow. So there could be concerns in the long-term future that we'll need to either have measures like this be more stringent, more regular, which is another reason why staff is looking for feedback on this, because getting ahead of the use, limiting the use, controlling it to the appropriate use now makes that crisis down the road much easier to absorb. communities like Oswego in Kendall County, I believe, and Joliet, their sections of the aquifer are well at a point beyond where McHenry County is. Their draw out of the aquifer is well beyond the safe yield. So that is why those communities are going through a very extensive and expensive process to bring what looks like Lake Michigan water out to those towns, several miles. So we're hoping to, as a region and then as a local community, again, looking at ordinances like this that are more conservation based to maybe push off that expensive crisis of an infrastructure project down the road. And you can see in this table here, it really explains it very well that all of our neighbors have taken that same approach. They're taking this conservation aspect to it, try to make it as simple and easy to understand as possible. I think face value, listen to the even odd concept of it, it's a little bit different, but it's different to us. It's been done in all these other communities for many, many years, actually. So it is a standard approach that's endorsed on a regional ordinance level, but also our neighbors have, which we talk to on a daily or very frequent basis with our peers in public works on how these approaches work. And to Trustee Walrus' point, we would definitely, before implementing an ordinance, I'd reach out to my peers just to see what growing pains, if any, that they had in implementing the process they have now and the enforcement of it.
In my opinion, Algonquins actually seems the easiest to understand mine, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if you look at the hours to be able to pinch right now, some of them have from this time to this time, this time to this time to just make it, what I think 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Try to make it as easy as possible. Yeah. Yep.
I kind of agree. I mean, I'm just, again, we don't need to make a decision, but just for discussion purposes, personally, I'd like to get rid of orange. I think only green, yellow, red, or green and red is going to simplify it. And I kind of was thinking, hey, if you combine them a little bit, and if we're going to do water conservation, I think we should have even odd days, period. That's your standard. Because you have to start somewhere, and I don't think you start when the problem is here. If we're proactive about it, we don't have to be reactive and have a major issue. So I would look at and say even odd days just to begin with. When the green section, everyone knows it. It's not a hey, what is it? Is it red? Am I green? What am I? You always know they're even odd. But then adding something like to the next tier that says, hey, we've got the prohibited use of sprinkler systems and just the outdoor watering with handheld systems for the yellow, and then red. I would like to keep 3 steps and make it as simple as possible. But I think to just say any day, we're missing the purpose of setting up a water conservation. Most residential people living in a residential area don't need to water their grass every day, no matter how hot it is. They can get away with doing every other day.
And odd and even makes it enforcement.
Odd and even makes it easy for enforcement. It just is a starting point.
So are you saying odd, even days
Starting-
and not based upon addresses? Like meaning like everybody on, I don't know, an even day can water, odd days they can't water, or are you talking about how it said with the addresses?
Addresses.
I think addresses with even and odd days. That way you're not having one area in town, you're also having, if it's a subdivision, you're not having every house being able to water at all times, just from the standpoint of what it's gonna do to water pressure and things of that nature. That's just my initial thought on it. I'm again, it's a little overwhelming, a little bit this, looking at all this, but I do think that we need to be, I'd rather be a leader on this than being in a situation like we're like Oswego or somewhere like that that's having a problem. So I'd rather address it and start getting some limitations on when we're green. I still want limitations. And I think if people are educated, they're going to know what it is. If it's just how it is all the time.
I would agree, and as a turf public service announcement, do not water your grass every day. You're creating weak grass that's going to be susceptible to all kinds of problems. Do not spoon feed your grass water every single day. You're wasting money, you're wasting water, you're wasting your time. But I would agree with Ellen's point of there's no reason it can't be odd even right now. It's the most basic and easy way to define it, and then it puts people through our communication piece of why you shouldn't water every single day, of here's the positive result we're going to get from that.
And Eric, I want to apologize if I seem like a Debbie Downer right in the beginning. I was just very overwhelmed, and you always do so much research, and that's amazing. It was just a lot for me right there and then, but you did an amazing job with everything. So please don't think that I was being negative with anything that you presented.
Trustee Dudek, you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm going to go Ellen one better. I think you just make it 2 categories. You
That's what I'm saying.
red.
I think red and green.
Have it red and then odd and even. And then we have to probably do a little bit more, Eric, into understanding the water needs, based on Rick's comments, the water needs of, say, the Park District for their sports fields, the golf courses for, the links. If they can get by on every other as well, then you don't have to carve them out. Otherwise, maybe we need to carve them out. But to me, I think just two categories, odd, even, work out some hours, address the needs of some of the commercial or sports entities, and then have red when, when it's a drought condition, it's red, period, end of sentence. So you only have two categories.
Okay.
Kind of like playing red light, green light. Remember playing that when you were younger? Red light, green light.
Or it could be red, yellow, or red, orange, doesn't have to be red, green.
Trustee Cavelli, any thoughts?
I think, can you go to the other side with all the other communities, Eric? I liked the McHenry one. I thought that was easy and simple. That's what I liked.
I agree. Simple. I like even the two categories, making it odd, even days. It just, I'm not one that likes a lot of big government overreach, telling people what they could do. We've got to be realistic when it comes to water conservation. We hear about this all the time, but I think that we need to keep it as simple and easy to understand as possible. So I know
Kim?
Eric got all the information he needed right now.
Kim, are you thinking though that you could take McHenry's, and would you be okay with taking the yellow and moving that down to green and just having green and red?
I mean, if it's green, then no time restrictions, I'm okay with that. And I'm okay, like, it's yellow, it's cautionary, so it's restricted times, and then red, just not having it. So I thought McHenry's was simple, easy, made sense.
Eric, I might also suggest that this is obviously not something we're doing tomorrow.
Right.
But I think it might be a good idea to put some stuff on our website about water conservation. I mean, I have a daughter that lives out west, and it's nasty out there. I mean, when you start thinking about, they're talking about Lake Mead with what they're finding, as the water table goes down. We're blessed with Lake Michigan, and I think that's what people view as a great water source. We're not on it, I get it, but still they view it that way. But our time's eventually going to come if we don't be careful. So I just think maybe getting ahead of the curve a little bit and providing some education might be a plus.
One of our upcoming projects for our new assistant to the director is going to be a little website overhaul for Public Works. So we'll be sure to take that advice and get some new, fresh information for water conservation on there. It's a good idea.
Anything else?
Good
Great
stuff.
job.
All right,
Great
so
job.
we will take this information and at a future committee meeting, we'll have a proposal for.
Just water it down a little.
Oh, jeez.
Late in the evening now.
It's 9 o'clock. Oh, is it? Oh, it's only 7. It does. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it. Favorite time of year. We have Wes from Lauterbach and Amen helping us out today to discuss our annual tax levy. Come on up.
Merritt Village Board, while Wes is coming up here, it is that time of year again. Comes quick, so tax levy time. As with most items, we'd like to provide you with options. On the second page of the staff report, we've got some options for you to consider. No increase to the tax levy, just taking the new growth, taking the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or taking the Consumer Price Index and the new growth. So we have to have this ordinance approved before the last Tuesday in December, so this is for discussion purposes tonight. Would like to get your feedback on how you want to proceed so we can prepare the ordinance and bring this back before you at our first meeting in December. So we've got a couple slides here that we'll go through, and I'll turn it over to Wes.
Thank you. I know I haven't presented in front of the board or the committee previously, but I've worked with the LNA team within the finance department since LNA started with you guys, so I do have a lot of familiarity. One of the things I like to do I just got to lean into it a little bit. It's a problem with being a little taller. One of the things I like to do in the beginning is kind of refresh ourselves with the property tax extension limitation law, or PTEL. We only do this once a year, and it's not something that we necessarily think about every day. But PTEL, or the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, tells us that we're allowed to increase the extension by CPI or 5%, whichever is less. So that means if we levied, in this case, 2.5 million last year, we can add 5% as a cap, with the exception or the addition of new growth, new property. It could be a renovation to a house or a new structure, or in the case of the prior meeting, a building coming off of the city's books and back onto the tax rolls. So the options that we've prepared this evening look at a 5% increase, so just at the limit of the Truth in Taxation Law, as well as the CPI, or 5% plus new growth. And are you guys all able to see the, okay, yeah, the slides. So if we look at the first column there, the 2021 extension, that was the actual dollars levied, extended by the county, and the tax rate. The tax rate is simply a way for us to apply the taxes to a property, so that rate is multiplied by EAV. The second column there is the 5% increase, which is roughly $129,000 over 2021. And then the third column, CPI plus new growth, which is slightly larger at $142,000. In those three scenarios, down at the bottom, you can see an estimate of what the actual tax payment on a home valued at $250,000, what portion of that tax bill would go to the Village of Cary. On the next slide, I wanted to give a little bit of an illustration of what PTEL can and can't do for the village, and how it's important to factor in, especially right now, economic situations as well as budgetary constraints that we project into the future, because PTEL is not a retroactive thing. So if we look at the top graph there, the tax extension over time, the village has maintained pretty much a level tax levy, with the exception of some new growth in a few years over the past 8 years. This is looking back to 2014. The green line there is the actual levy over time. The yellow line is the potential levy under PTEL. So over that 8-year period, the spread there, the revenue we have not captured over that 8-year period is just over $1 million. Graph below looks a little boring. It's two flat lines. But over time, again, if we forego a 5% increase this year, what does that look like 8 years from now? And in 1 year, potential lost revenues is just over 1.1 million. Over the last 25 years, CPI has been in the 3% range a handful of times. Over the last 8 years, CPI has ranged from 0.8 to, I think, 2.3%. So not very significant numbers, maybe 20,000 here, 30,000 there in any given year. But this 1 year's worth of increase essentially has the same impact as the last 8, is what I was trying to illustrate. Questions on levy amounts before I turn it over to Jake for some additional?
So we just wanted to provide some education here too for our residents. I think most of the board is aware just of the small portion that is received by the Village of Cary. On the far right side of the column, you'll see that approximately 5% of a resident's tax bill is going to the Village of Cary. We are a little bit biased about the services that we provide. We think that residents get a pretty good bang for their buck for 5% of the property tax bill going to the Village of Cary. And then property tax rate, Wes had touched on it a little bit here on our property tax rate. This, when we look at how we compare to our peers, this is a situation where we like to be on the bottom. You can see our property tax rate very competitive. The board has taken a very, I guess, miserly approach to when we look at the tax levy, try to reduce that impact to our residents as much as possible. So we should be very proud of the tax rate of where we stand right now. And I know the board has seen this before, but again, just for educational purposes for our residents, we talk about here the importance of the property taxes to the Village of Cary. We've chatted during our budget meetings about the big three: our sales tax, income tax, and property tax. Sales tax and income tax, we see changes. There's variations with those each year. Sales tax, we do our best to estimate what the amount is going to come into the Village of Cary. Same with income tax. Unfortunately, with income tax, we've seen over the last few years the state has played some games with income tax that we receive and other municipalities see. The one known that we have, though, is property tax. Property taxes, we have the levy each year, and that is the known that we have within the budget. So that is why this is such an important discussion for us to have. And then what have we been doing? We've touched on it a little bit here, but for the last couple of years, the board has been very cognizant of not trying to impact residents or minimize the amount of impact residents see on their tax bill. You can see over the last 8 years, we've had we've taken 2 increases to the consumer price index. Several years that have been very flat, and I can tell you that we have a very talented finance staff, but as one that's part of putting the budget together, it does make it challenging when we have those years of no increase, but then we see increases to contractual agreements that we have with staff. We see increases to insurance, police pension. Those are some that we see each year, and so it does get challenging. This year is a little bit different. Wes has alluded to that CPI is 5%, which is a lot larger number than we've seen in years past. And then finally, just for purposes here, as you consider that increase, certainly respect that this decision is not an easy one for the village board to make, but we did a little snapshot here of just projections for next year, what we're looking at from a budgetary impact. Wages, you can see on the top row, the wages next year, we've made some assumptions. We do have a known with the SEIU contract, that's a 2.5% increase. The FOP contract actually expires next May, and so we assume 2.5%, but I just don't know. We don't know where that number will land from a wage perspective. Insurance, so health insurance for our employees, we plan for an increase in health insurance. Professional services, we anticipate professional services increase. And then finally, as the board heard at one of our last meetings here, the police pension contribution is going to go up. That is a known. The other 3 that we have there are assumptions. So with that, those assumptions, we have a plan 283,000 plus or minus. And those are kind of the 4 main ones that we have. There could be others that pop up, but this is our best estimate. So with that, no, it's obviously a challenging decision, and certainly respect the board's opinions on this, want to hear your feedback, but we are recommending taking the consumer price index and the new growth. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Let's unroll. Any thoughts or comments from the board?
So I want to clarify, Jake, if you could, that what the numbers we're looking at here, the difference for the police pension, as we just heard, that 39,000, that's locked in. We are already going to go up that no matter what.
Yes.
I would call attention to the fact that the estimate on new growth only is only $13,000. So if we decide to only take new growth, we're immediately guaranteed to be $20,000+ in the hole from what we're talking about right now. And second piece to that is if you do either of the consumer, or the CPI or CPI and new growth, and the estimates the staff has put together here of, plus $240-some thousand, if those come even halfway true, we've already spent what we're saying that we might want to grab here. So I would tend to believe that the staff can estimate these things based on their experience within a 50% margin of error. So if we're within a 50% margin of error and we're already at the $143,000 that we're estimating to take in for this, to me, that reads as a net zero. So I don't like seeing anybody's property tax bill go up, let alone mine, but I do know everything else has a cost. We're locked into $40,000 increase, and we're hoping to keep the other increases below the estimates that are here. But the truth in the numbers is that's going to be a very, very difficult scenario, and we're looking at losing ground financially and telling the residents that we're going to have to cut their services so that we can make ends meet if we don't acquire the right amount of revenue.
Any other comments?
I would agree wholeheartedly with Trustee Walrath. First of all, talking about taxes is always, no one wants to be the tax collector. We all know that those are not, it's not usually a great title to have. But I also think that we are tasked with being financially responsible for what we're looking to do. We just can't kick the can down the road and expect. I think it was very telling when you showed that slide about how much lost revenue we have for what we haven't done. I think that I can't imagine, I think it's a big educational piece for our residents, but I can't imagine any resident not understanding the cost of everything has gone up significantly. We're going to see that with some of our other things, whether it be motor, our gas for our cars, that we're using, for public works, for everyone else. We're going to see some additional increases. So I have to agree with Trustee Walrath and say that I think that it's imperative as good, prudent financial stewards of our taxpayers' money that we have to do the CPI and new growth. Not that I want to, but I just think that's what's dictated by where we're at. And it's not, I think we have to keep it in perspective. If you're talking $18 for a $250,000 home, if it's a $500,000 home, people that are in a $500,000 home can afford $36 more a year. I just think that should go without, shouldn't be much of an issue.
Trustee Weinhammer, you have a comment?
No, so I was just thinking about when I had met with you and Jake. So was it like about, so Trustee McAlpine was saying what, how much a year? $36?
Well, I think you estimated around $18 for $250, so for
Okay.
$500, say about $36.
Can we
And
go
then when I
back-
met with you,
back to
what
that
did you say?
slide,
It was like
Courtney?
$4 a month or something?
Not even. I mean, yeah, we had a very great, a really good conversation, understanding. You have to look at it from, Trustee McAlpine really kind of touched on it. Taxation is a horrible word. No one likes to talk about it. But unfortunately, that's how government survives. That's how we provide the vital services to our residents and our businesses. And we've been really very staunch when it comes to what our tax rate has been and what we do and what we look at. And if you go back to that slide that shows that we have held the line on these for years and years and years and years. We are dealing with an economy right now that's very uncertain, and we need to set ourselves up for success in the future. Not all of us are going to be on this board forever, and through the proper financial planning of previous boards, we're able to do what we have been able to do because they've taken a little bit more than we have. But this is thank you for putting the slide back up. This is a telling slide that we have taken these decisions very seriously. For us to have an opportunity to capture this that would have really a negative impact, if you were to use another word, on a taxpayer of we'll say $250,000 house is $18, or if it's a $500,000, it's $36. I don't want to minimize the fact that it seems like it's that, because when you look at the tax bill, I can't tell you the number of times I've had people come in and talk to me about their tax bill and tell me, why am I raising taxes? And I'm like, well, first of all, let's talk about taxes. I'm responsible for the bottom two lines on your tax bill. A lot of people don't understand that. They think that we dictate what the taxes are for all the taxing districts. And I said, well, you're talking, you have to go to all, we have the fire protection district here, we have the park district, we have the library district. And people are just like blown away by that. And I think it's an educational thing. I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of other taxing districts that have to do what they think they need to do. That's why they're elected. That's why they do their jobs. We provide the vital services for our community. We provide 24-hour security for our residents. We provide all the waste and sanitation. We do the roads. I mean, you can go on and on and on, but we have to be able to stand up and say, look, this increase isn't as much as you would think it would be. Does that make sense? I think that we have an opportunity to educate our constituents and say, look, this is how we need to do it this year. Everybody, I mean, I'm in my business. Everything is just blowing up. I get emails every day about everything is going up in cost. We are not immune to that. We look at these things from a business perspective. We're not immune to those costs. Our largest cost to the villages of Cary is our labor. I ask, when I'm out in the community talking about taxes and things, and you ask people, how much money do you think the village of Cary collects from property taxes? They're like, what, $15 million? Like, no. We're at like $2.5 million. So like your tax that you tax us is $2.5 million. Most of the time, yes. They're unaware that these are real dollars and that affects the day-to-day services. So we as a board have to come to a decision at what is best. We know what our fixed costs are. We know what is going to happen in the future. We look at these things. We look at how, we've been very good stewards with the tax dollars. And again, like the slide that Trustee McAlpine referenced, I mean, had we taken everything that was tight, we would be in a much better financial situation right now. But perhaps our taxpayers may not be. So we need to look at this and have a hearty conversation and talk about the pros and cons and come up with what's best for the village. I mean, the cost of doing business just is staggering.
I also think this is going to look a lot different next year with a lot of new growth coming in. We also have a dispensary coming online. There'll be a lot more chances at different incomes next year, so I'm in favor of both this year also.
Trustee Dudek, any comments?
No, historically, I've always been in favor of both. I remain in favor of both. I think oddity is probably not the right word, but the impactful piece this year is just the dramatic increase in CPI. So, it's really not, this is not changing my position by any means, but it's really not our $18 or $36. It's that same thing taken for every one of the other taxing districts. And it'll increase people's tax bills if the other districts do the same quite a bit, simply because the CPI is so much higher than it's been historically. But nonetheless, Trustee Walrath made the comment early on, and he's right. You can't run a business in a negative profit. And if we don't do this, we are already, even if we do, but we can't do it to the extent that you would if you did one of the other options. So I will go for both.
Well, historically, I've been for no increase. I will stay with that again this year. I know of other towns that aren't taking increases, and they're relying more on a sales tax base. And I'd like to see Cary grow to that model so that we're not relying on this. I think saying it's only $36, when you couple it with all the other taxing bodies out there, that makes a significant increase in somebody's property taxes. Right. And with gas prices up, utility prices up, food prices up, I don't think it's right for us to just say it's only $36. And so I think we gave out bonuses this year. We did make some expenditures this year that were nice to haves, and we were able to do that. And so I would like us to see us keep the no increase.
Well, some of that money came from monies that we got from the state, one-time shots.
I don't disagree with you on that, but I'm just looking at some of the stuff that we're spending money on. And again, I know there are homeowners out there right now struggling with making those tough decisions. And if we can do our part and not do that increase, I think that would be just really, really good for our residents right now.
I agree with everything that you had said. On the other hand, too, is when you talk to the taxpayers about these things, I say we don't look at this. We look at this on a year-to-year basis. We don't look at these things. To what Trustee Collier had said, we have some new businesses that are going to be bringing additional revenues that could plug some of these holes. And we've got we have a new Thornton's. We've got the dispensary coming in. We've got 2 new developments that are coming in that are going to be a benefit because they're untaxed properties right now. We just approved those this evening. That's going to have a the car wash. We have people right now, to Trustee Cavelli's point, that are investing in the Village of Cary right now. They're bringing that retail element. We have to be proactive, but at the same time, we have to be able to maintain our core services that we provide to our residents and businesses every day. And we don't take these decisions lightly. I wish that we could say that. I wish all of our taxing districts could say that. But I'm not responsible for anybody, but we're responsible here, and we need to do what's right for us on this particular year. Like I just had this conversation last week with somebody. We're talking about the amount of money that's on the table right now. If we don't take that, that goes away forever. We'll never get that back. So we have to look at our future growth and what we're setting ourselves up for the future. So
If I could ask, Courtney, if you go back to the year-over-year comparison showing the times we did not take any tax increase, and I think, and I don't want to speak for Trustee Cavalli, but I think part of the issue is here, during those times we made those tough decisions and the staff responded with positive budgets at zero increase, zero increase, zero increase. All those together were doing exactly what Trustee Cavalli was saying, which is being as prudent as possible and trying to have our residents enjoy minimal tax increase, at least from our end. However, to the point that was made earlier on CPI, and I could defer to our experts here, when was the last time everybody was using 5% as the lower of the two? It just is unheard of. Therefore, this is going to be the bump that we're going to look at in future years that we couldn't avoid. And then to be prudent in those future out years is maybe, okay, let's look at the middle ground where we're back to taking 3% because it's less than the 5% cap. I had this conversation for the Park District that employs my company just last week, and it was the same thing. When nobody could understand, consequently, Lauterbach and Amon is the same representative, the 5% of the cap was never the lower of the two and hasn't been for as long as anybody can remember. So while, yes, this is going to be one of the larger increases that we probably see on record, it's going to be across the board. And to the mayor's point, that lost revenue, if we don't take that now, then that doesn't become part of the fold. And we saw what the cost, what the lost revenue cost was by not doing that in 17, 18, 19 in a row, taking 0%. That amount, in current day dollars, is like $1.4 million lost. So I get the argument of we do want to keep it as low as possible, but the reality is we are doing the lower of the two. We're not taking inflation. Our costs are going up by 8, 9, 10%, and we're only raising 5% on the CPI. So yes, it is hard to tell somebody who's struggling that it's only $36 or it's only $18, but we have to be good financial stewards of our end, because the end result is us cutting services. And to the mayor's point earlier, we only really offer 3 services in a big picture in big buckets, and they're critical services.
And I think just kind of going back to even what Trustee Duda talked about earlier, it's an educational component. So I love that dollar bill, and I think we need to make sure that we're getting that out to our residents to let them know what portion of their dollar is going to the village. I think it's a very important educational component piece.
And I respect everything everybody's saying, and I absolutely get where Trustee Cavelli's coming and all the comments that she made. And this will actually be the first time that I'll change my vote based upon some conversations that the 3 of us have had. And, I'm just also looking at it that everybody else sounds so weird to say, and someone's going to be so angry at me probably for saying it, but everybody else is taking their percentage, and we haven't in several years. And if we can't even still make that, if we're under, as you guys had said, for the police pension, and those are important things that we are obligated to. So I know you guys don't need my vote for it. You would have it without it, but I'll be in favor of it for once.
Well, I mean, these are great conversations to have. I think our residents and our businesses need to know that we are painfully aware of this. This is not an easy decision. You sit here every year after year after year. I get the pitch like sometime in August, it's September from Jake, and we're like, oh my God, I don't even talk about this. But these are
warm you up.
I know, but these are things that I hate. This it's such a strong word, but it's an uncomfortable situation to be put in. But this is why we're in these seats that we are, because we have to be forward thinking. We have to look at what's the best interest. And, I tell people, I said, you know what, we built, not one complaint do we have about building this building. Not one property tax dollar went to build this building. We don't use any of our general fund money to pay for this building at all. It's a separate item. That is how prudent we have been with people's money that we're using. We take these situations and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think that we've proven, you look back at this, going back from 2015, we've made some excellent decisions. And I think that, with the negative impact some of the middle years have had, we just need to look forward to these things. And as I have said before, we look at these things on a year-to-year basis. Things may look a little bit better next year. The economy may be a little bit better. Our sales tax revenue may look better. I wish that we could be like other communities that rely so heavily on their retail sales tax. We just don't have that. But I'm telling you, we're working on it, and we're getting there. And that's part of it. That's part of what we have to do and how we need to educate people on why we're doing what we're doing. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anybody else have any other comments? Well, thank you very much.
Can I just make one more comment? On our packet here, it says, and I just want to clarify this, it says, the increase attributable to new growth will have no negative impact on the homeowner's portion of the tax bill attributable to the Village of Cary. But you did say with new growth, if there's an addition or any sort of renovation that's made, that the tax, or that the homeowner could see an increase in their taxes with new growth?
If a homeowner's, the value of the property increases, the rate
Okay.
stays the same, but it's applied to a higher number, so the tax does increase. But all things being the same, VAB was 250 last year, 83,000 last year, and 83,000 this year. There would be no change to the tax bill.
Okay, I just want to make that note on there.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Wes, thank you very much. Did a great job on your first try here talking to us, so we appreciate that.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
your patience.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Sat through everything
if
tonight.
I could, not to draw this out, but you posed the question of CPI over time. PTEL was actually implemented in 1991, so that's as far back as we can go to say what were the increases. But over that period of time, from 91 to current, the highest CPI has ever been is 4%. That was 1 year. And on average, it's around 2.6% over the last 31 years.
Challenging times.
Great information.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We have one more thing on the agenda. Pedestrian snow removal. Pardon me?
Can I ask a question about the CPI?
Sure, come on, state your name and address, please.
David Miller, 65 Highway 14. Does the village also get increase on the property taxes on the new growth, on the new buildings? Like, we got 2 new buildings coming in the Village of Cary that had no tax at all. The village, the old senior center.
Right, that's been accounted for. That's in that.
That's already figured into the equation?
Mhm.
And the 5 new houses up here
Yep.
across the street and.
Well, that'll all come back to us. Like, I think the new
Right.
growth that we're looking at right now is $13,000.
Mhm.
That's not going to affect, all the other taxpayers. That's telling the county that this is money that we're going to have, and so this will
Right.
be
The
allocated to
village will be
ours.
getting that in our coffers too,
Correct.
through taxing. And also next year, year after, they'll be reassessing all the property taxes in Algonquin Township to the new values that houses are inflated on, and that's gonna hit us big. We're gonna, once the assessor does his job, that's gonna boost the money coming in the village also, because all our values have went up, although until we sell it, we don't see it, but we're gonna be paying taxes on that.
Right.
Just a FYI.
Thank you. Last on our committee agenda is designation of the pedestrian routes for snow removal. Director Morimoto.
I'm back. This is our annual discussion on the designation of the pedestrian routes for snow removal. As you might recall, as part of our overall snow operations, we hit the streets first, so to speak, and then as a secondary operation, after the roads are clear and that part of the operation is completed, we then assign staff and resources to clear certain sidewalks and bike paths throughout the village. And those are what are shown on the screen here. This shows not just what the village does, which is in light blue, but also some of our partnering agencies of the school districts and park districts. So that is the current map. We are proposing no changes from last year. So this is maintaining the status quo is what we're recommending. But we're happy to hear any feedback the village board and the committee might have. And if there is no changes, or if there are changes, we will present those at the next village board meeting for approval and resolution.
Any comments on this?
No, I just have a quick question. So I know you guys plow the streets and then you guys go to the sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. Is there a certain order on how the sidewalks are plowed?
Actually, I can, Superintendent Kopass, would you mind coming to the mic?
So just to clarify, isn't there snow hauling downtown that's done before that too?
It depends on the amount of snow that we get. Typically, we will start from, when we do pedestrian areas, we'll start closer to the shop and then work our way out, kind of going towards the Route 14, then working our way up to Crystal Lake Road, and then coming back down through Cary, Algonquin to Fox Trails. If there is large amounts of snow that we have to haul out of the Metro lot, we still do the pedestrian routes, we just don't do them as quickly because we don't have as many staff diverted towards that. And then the equipment is also used downtown.
I guess I'm asking, what order do you do the sidewalks? I know they're not done as quickly, but in my head, I'm just thinking about kids that are walking to school. Like, would you guys do those routes that are closest to the school, like Crystal Lake Road over by Deer Path Elementary and Cary Junior High and the high school and Three Oaks Elementary and Briargate?
A lot of the times when we do the sidewalks, we try to get in early to do them. We'll have staff come in about 3 a.m. and start knocking those out just because the equipment on the roads, especially going along 14 with the heavy traffic, it's easier to get in and out and safer. We do try to prioritize school areas, but if you don't get there at a certain time, you're just stuck in traffic. So depending on when we actually start it, we may hit those after school started, but have them done before school ends.
There are a lot of kids that are walkers or even in the wintertime. So if you guys could just think about it, please think about making sure, because the kids can't, I mean, when I look at attendance and why kids aren't there, sometimes, you know, it's, if they miss the bus and their parents are working or whatever, even with walking, if they can't walk there. I know you guys have probably heard this before, but I'm just asking to please try and make it a priority.
We do. We try to get them as clean up as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Typically, we can have them done, if we're not diverted doing other stuff, we can have them all done in a day.
So just for clarification purposes, like if you look at Three Oaks Road, just for anyone that's watching this, you can look from the library and also the high school, and you can see the villages on there is doing it, and also the public libraries in there for doing it, or the park district rather, and so is the school. So who's really responsible for making sure that's cleared? Is there anyone that's really responsible?
We're responsible for the stuff that's the villages. There are a lot of areas that overlap, and we'll just hit it because we're there, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to just skip it.
Okay.
As far as who's actually responsible, like I said, if we're there, we'll hit it. But typically we won't go, if we've done all our stuff and someone's made a mess on the park district bike path, we won't go and clean it back out. We'll divert that towards the park district and ask them to get it.
Makes sense.
And you'll see on the map, like Three Oaks Road's a good example.
Yes.
There's 2 lines, a blue line and a yellow line over by the high school. 2 sides of the road. So the high school obviously is taking care of the sidewalk along their frontage of their property, which is why we mark that. And same for the park district. They have a path that happens to go along the frontage of Cary Grove Park. So they take care of that just as part of the responsibility as a good property owner. Then we're taking care of the sides that are the opposite side of the road.
So just like, out of curiosity, the bottom line is it needs to be done. So I'm just asking the question. So why isn't then the school district doing Three Oaks Road by Three Oaks School? Why aren't they on there? Why is it us?
They do clear along their property edge, but we, like Superintendent Cope has mentioned, we have to do the sides to the left or to the west and to the east of it. It wouldn't make sense for us to pick up our blade or go into the road and
I
skip
understand
that section.
completely.
So we mark it as done because we make a pass.
Sure, perfect.
And we only have, the point as to the order we go, we do only have one piece of equipment that's narrow enough to go on a sidewalk. We can sometimes hit a wider bike path with with our Bobcat or a pickup truck, but some of these 5 foot wide sidewalks, we have the articulated wheel loader. It is the only one with a snow blower narrow enough to fit through those. So we prioritize where we can, but we only have one piece of equipment to move that chess piece around with.
Makes sense.
To that end, I'm glad you brought that up. There's specific pieces of equipment used for specific items. You mentioned we can't do one piece can't go on a sidewalk, they can go on a trail, and you have those pieces, and the park district has those pieces, and the school district has those pieces. Has there been any high-level conversation on, and the one that just makes me put a palm to my head is right in front of the downtown, the tiny little section in front of the Veterans Park, that the park district is hauling all the way across town to do what amounts to 250 feet. You know, it would seem logical that there's probably some trade-off, and I look at the same thing around Briargate. There's 2 tiny little areas. Now, granted, that might be the sidewalk in front of the park district's building, so it makes sense. But we have an opportunity, maybe not this year because we're, 30 days from snow. There should be some conversations at the top level of all the municipal bodies to say, let's look at this in a lineal footage scenario and an equipment scenario. Because if you have a piece that can do the trails, and you're picking it up and going all the way across town just to do 500 feet of a trail over by the dog park, that's not the best use of anybody's time, particularly if the park district is going to pick it up and go another 1,000 feet after that. So I would just ask it that those conversations between the 3 bodies be held, and maybe we can find a little more efficient way to do it for everybody's staff.
Excellent suggestion. We'll take a look at that.
Any other comments about snow removal?
I'm not ready for it.
Yeah, who said 30
Won't
days?
snow this year.
This one over here said that.
Jeez. It is. Yeah, I'd rather talk about sprinkling. Yeah. All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Come on up and. Hold on. You got to give your name and address.
I was here for the dust rain, and we lost. But I talked to the police department about putting people on the street where they got the crazies. Thank you. There was a woman on Kerrywood Circle, unblocked car, female officer. Hope she nailed the bastards. That's all I can say. Number 2, I do all my shopping in Crystal Lake, Schaumburg, Deer Park, etc., because there's nothing here to speak of. It's really, there was the Cary 2020 game that was nothing. There's got to be an activity to create tax dollars for retail. This town has nothing, absolutely nothing. I came here in '05 from Arlington Heights. I couldn't buy a pair of shoes then, and I can't buy a pair of shoes now. Discounting Dollar General, which I never go to. Last, activities. Crystal Lake has 9 concerts a year. They had Johnny Appleseed Day. They have the 4th of July. They have the carnivals. They have the fireworks. They have that. They have the other concerts. And then they had what we call, what was it called? It was called Flannel Fest, which was lumberjacks doing different activities. That's a source of dollars. Please, folks, get off the bus and get retail here because you're dying. I go to Mariano's, I go to Fresh Market, and my wife goes to the Jewel in Fox River Grove because the Jewel here doesn't do it. Thank you. Here's the data for you.
Yeah. Could I get your name?
Judd Erickson, 537 Kerrywood Circle. I'm a Florida resident.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think we had I did it all in favor. Everybody's yay, so we're adjourned.
Okay.
There were no no's. No nays. Thank you.